Hi, welcome to Mimi's Little City Homestead. We're working on ketchup. We've got a lot of Roma tomatoes or paste tomatoes. I'm going to need 25 pounds of tomatoes cut and put in my roaster pan. And I have quite a few Romas here. And then I have more over in my sink soaking that I've been washing. So what I'm going to do is cut my tomatoes on my board and weigh them on my kitchen scale that I have here. So I'm going to do a 5-pound bowl at a time. I'm going to need 5 of those to get to my 25. If I don't have enough Romas, I'm going to use the canning tomatoes. I have some Heirloom tomatoes over there that's left from after I made my spaghetti sauce. So whatever I need to supplement, I will use those tomatoes for. So we're going to get started on going through and sorting our tomatoes and getting them into our roaster. So I got my bowl set at 0 pounds and ounces. And we have some large Romas. Any bad spots that are on them, I'm going to cut off. Otherwise, I'm just going to cut off the tops and remove that part. I don't want too much green in here, but I'm going to take the cores out, cut them in quarters, go ahead and put them in my bowl. There's a spot there. We'll just go ahead and cut that out. A couple more. Just remove those. Look underneath. There isn't anything bad inside that tomato at all. So by the time I remove all my spots, take my core out and cut them. I'll put them in my bowl and we'll measure these out and see what we come up with. Got my garbage bowl over here for my tops. And just cut my tomatoes. So I will bring you back after we have 25 pounds in a roaster pan. Okay, I have all 25 pounds of my tomatoes for my roaster ready. I had about 21.5 pounds of Romas, so I filled in with Heirloom tomatoes and other slicing tomatoes. So this is what I ended up with in my roaster. This is going to roast overnight. We're going to put it at about 250. So more things are going in the ketchup. So what we're going to do is put the lid on at 250. That was a removable pan. So we'll put the lid on here and start heating them up. And I'm going to go to bed because it's very late. It is 3:45 a.m. Took me that long to process the tomatoes that I did for the spaghetti sauce and now the ketchup. So we're gonna let those cook down for a few hours at 250. And then we'll check them in the morning and see how far we've gone. There won't be liquid gone because we've got the lid on to cook down the tomatoes, but we'll see how far down we got them cooked so we can process that into ketchup. And you'll notice the seeds and skins are still on the tomatoes. We're gonna leave them just like that. We're not gonna run them through the food mill. I'm gonna show you another way that we can do this. All right, so now that my tomatoes have cooked down about halfway for my ketchup, I've got 1.5 large onions, very large onions. There's kind of a sweet onion is what I use. So 1.5 of those I put in. Gonna let that cook down. So we're gonna give this about 45 minutes or so. Okay, so we've got our tomatoes for our ketchup cooked down quite a bit. It's very thick. But it still has enough liquid in it. It's going to need to continue to cook, and we're adding vinegar and spices to it. So what we need to do at this point, blend down our tomatoes in our blender and get them all liquefied, onions, everything. And then we're going to put it into our pot. I will then add the rest of the ingredients that we need for our ketchup and let it continue to cook down in the pot until we've got it thick enough to be able to can. Okay, our first batch, and that's a high-speed blender, so all the skins, seeds, everything has been blended down to just a sauce, and that's what we want. So we'll keep going and get it all blended, and after I've got that done, I'll bring you back. Again, I want to show you a little bit of that after being blended, how it's just like a thicker ketchup already. Now, if you don't have a high-speed blender, which would be like a Vitamix, or this is a Ninja Pro IQ blender that will go up to 1400 100 watts. Then you could also try a hand blender or a stick blender, but it's got to be something pretty powerful to blend up all those seeds and skins into nothing but sauce. Okay, so we have all of our tomatoes and onions pureed right down to a sauce, and we're gonna add in the rest of our ingredients, which is 2 cups of granulated sugar. This is 1.5 cups of white vinegar and 1.5 cups of apple cider vinegar. We have a teaspoon of black pepper. This is a scant or less than 1/4 cup of canning salt. This is 2.25 teaspoons of garlic, granulated garlic, 1/4 teaspoon of celery seed, and 1/2 teaspoon of dry mustard or mustard powder. So this is going to be all stirred in together. It's pretty thick, especially with adding in the sugar. And believe it or not, the vinegar did not thin it down a lot. It is still pretty thick. Not thick enough to use as ketchup or can as ketchup, but it's getting there. So we're gonna put this on our stove top, and I'm going to turn it on a simmer with the lid off. It's gonna be a medium low, bringing it to a simmer so that it can reduce more and get rid of evaporate more of the liquid and the water in the recipe, and we'll just check back on it about every 20 minutes or so and see how it's getting thicker till we think that it's to the point where it can be canned. So it's been about 2 hours since I added my spices, and I just wanted to bring you in and show you how much it's gone down, about 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches in the last 2 hours. Some more of the liquid is cooked out. So I'm just giving it a stir about every half an hour right now. And it's still not as thick as I want it. So what I'm going to do is turn the heat up just a little bit more and see if I can get this to cook down quicker. If this doesn't cook down to where I want it in about half an hour, I may add some Clear Jel to it like I do my pie fillings, just a small enough amount to thicken it. We'll see what happens here. Okay, I'm back to show you where we're at with our ketchup. Right now, looking down into the pot, if I can get it there. Right now, looking down into the pot, you can kind of see that it's still not real thick. I mean, it is pretty thick, but it's not as thick as I want it for ketchup. So what I'm gonna do with it is use some of my Clear Jel thickener. It's a modified starch that is able to stand up to the heat of canning. It's approved for canning, and so what I'm going to do for the size container that I have on the stove right now, I'm going to use 1/2 cup about of the Clear Jel, and then I'm going to add enough water to that to make a paste. So to my 1/2 cup of Clear Jel, I've added about just a little over 1/2 cup of water, and I'm going to stir that all together. It's not quite a paste, but it's a thick, like normally you would need about twice the amount of water as you do Clear Jel, but in this case I just used about the same amount, so it's a little bit thicker. I used cold water, and I'm going to bring my ketchup up to almost a boil, add this to it, and then see how thick we can get it. So I want to show you again a better view. This is, I'm going to try to do this one-handed holding the camera, but this is the consistency after cooking it down before adding the Clear Jel. And I want to just keep stirring it a little bit because I don't want it to scorch. And it's getting thick enough now where sticking is a real possibility. So we'll just keep kind of stirring it here and there and wait for it to come to a boil. In the meantime, I have my jars, pint jars, in my water bath canner heating up. I've washed and dried my lids, so I won't be heating those in water. But I tasted this, and I gotta tell you, it tastes so good. It's a very good ketchup taste, more like a store-bought. And this recipe, I watched Sarah over at Living Traditions, and she has come up with this recipe because she likes Heinz ketchup and liked the bottled taste more than the usual canned ketchup, the old-fashioned ketchup with the cinnamon and sweeter, more sugar type taste. And I've made a few adjustments to this for my own taste. And so I will put the recipe down in the description. The taste of this is really good. I think it's better than store-bought myself. I think it's better than the old-fashioned recipe I used to make that actually I ended up using it more often as a sloppy joe sauce than I did a ketchup. It was just a little bit too sweet for a ketchup, but this is perfect. Okay, now that we're starting to come to a boil, I'm going to add about half of my Clear Jel and stir it to see where we get thickness-wise. It needs to boil for about a minute, so we'll see how much thicker this gets. If I think it needs more, I'll add the rest of the Clear Jel to it and thicken it up some more. It's kind of hard to see through the steam, I know, but it is getting thicker. Give it a minute to come back up to a boil. This is a beautiful bright red ketchup. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of my Clear Jel to the pot. Now when it starts really boiling, that's when you want to keep stirring it constantly. Don't let it stick or scorch to the bottom of the pan. This is more of the consistency I want for it, for my ketchup. You see, it's pretty thick. It's almost look like a pudding when you're cooking it, how it gets thicker. That's how I want my ketchup to look before I can it. And that Clear Jel is helping that happen. Okay, I think we're ready to can it up. I'm going to shut it off and bring it over to our counter and get out our jars. Okay, so we got everything set up to can. Got my lids and rings. They've been washed and dried. Vinegar, paper towels to clean the rims off, my ladle, and my ketchup. Get one of the jars out of the canner here. It's all nice and hot. One thing I will say is we won't be adding lemon juice or citric acid to this because we have so much vinegar in it already that it is safe to can with water bath canner. But as you can see, it's pretty thick for as hot as it is. Now when this cools down, it'll even be thicker. So we're going to fill this jar up to about a 1/2 inch headspace. And we're going to take our vinegar and paper towel, go around that lid or the rim of the jar. We don't want any ketchup on that rim. We want that to be clean. And we're going to take our brand new lid, center it on there. And we're going to put in our ring, and this is just going to be fingertip tight. We want it snug enough to hold that lid down, but we don't want it to be too tight. The air has to be able to escape during the canning process. So again, our ketchup nice and thick. Smells really good. Gonna give it that 1/2 inch headspace. Now I did not do this with the first one, and I probably should. You wouldn't think that you would need to debubble it being liquid, but since it is a thick liquid, I think we should go down the sides. Just kind of put that through there. Make sure there aren't any big bubbles in the bottom. Looks like it could use a little bit more to get to that 1/2 inch. Not quite there yet. Take our paper towel again, go around the rim, clean that off really, really good. Put on our new ring, put on our new lid, grab a ring, just fingertip tight. Then those are going to go back in the canner while they're still hot. So I'm going to continue canning up as many jars as I can fit in my canner this round, and then I will bring you back. I got 7 jars in my canner. bringing it up to a boil. Gonna put a lid on it. When it comes to a rolling boil, that is when I will set my timer, and these will can for 30 minutes. Okay, now that my jars are getting ready to come to a boil, you'll notice I've got about an inch or inch and a half of water above the jars. They need to be submerged right into the water. I'm gonna dump in the leftover vinegar from my bowl. Keeps my jars sparkling clean looking, otherwise I get a lot of mineral deposits on my jars. They turn white, get really cloudy, and they're hard to clean. You have to scrub that right off the jars, so I try to remember to put vinegar in every time. So I'm going to put my lid on and let this come to a rolling boil, and then I will start my timer for 30 minutes, and I'll bring you back when that's up. Okay, we've got our canning time is over. Took the lid off and let it set for 5 minutes, and they're starting to ping already. So we're going to take these out. Put my towel here. Okay. So this is what we have so far. And I'm going to get the jars back in the canner to heat up our next set of jars and get the next batch in there and get it canned. Well, I've got my second batch out of the canner. So we got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 pints, 13 pints if you count the 2 half pints. So that's a lot of ketchup. I did a couple of smaller ones so that anybody in the family wants to try this to see how they like it can take home like a little sample one and try it. But we got a pretty good amount of ketchup, and it is very good. So I'd like to thank you guys for canning with me again. I wanted to mention also that we will let these set for 12 to 24 hours. And then after that, I'll remove the rings and wash the jars off and label them and put them in my pantry. And I think that this will last probably about a year, depending on if I use it. I may use some of it for my Sloppy Joe sauce. I like to do that with it. But it was really fun making those. The roaster made it really easy. The next thing I'm going to can, I'm going to put in the roaster. We're going to make pizza sauce, and I'm going to make a marinara sauce. Everything will go in the roaster, and that made it so much easier to let that set in there and roast for a couple of days. And I think that helped the flavor. It also made it a lot easier to reduce it down so that I could get it liquefied and then reduce it the rest of the way on the stove. So I think that's the way to go, because that's a pretty much hands-off. You just set it at 250, which is about a low setting on your crock pot. And I let it go overnight. It doesn't burn or stick, and it reduced it down to pretty much all the liquid was about gone. And then when we put it in our blender, it was pretty thick. But you could also use a hand blender or an immersion blender in your roaster pan if that's something you'd rather do, if it makes it easier for you. I like putting it in my blender, skin and seeds and all, and it blended it right down to a liquid that was easy to work with. So thanks again for stopping by. If you don't mind and you like these videos and want to catch the next one as it comes out, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate when you do that, and it helps my channel a lot. So thanks again for stopping by. I hope you try this. It's really good. I'll have the recipe in the description, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.